Good morning, everyone. We're just gonna give it a minute for the Zoom to let everyone trickle in. And I hope you're all well on this rainy Saturday afternoon. Okay. So hello and welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us for the Live from the Studio with Griffin's first Emerging Indigenous Studio Award winner, Cody Tolmie. My name is Bahar Mahazadnia, and I'm the Assistant Curator of Engagement here at Griffin Art Projects. Oops. Before we begin, we would like to acknowledge that our work takes place on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Squamish and Tsleil-Waututh nations, to whom we are deeply grateful. I would also like to thank North Vancouver Recreation and Culture and the Frybee Foundation for their generous support of Griffin's residency programs. And now just a few housekeeping notes before today's presentation. If you would like to see live captions displayed for today's presentation, you can enable this by clicking the CC Live transcription button at the bottom of your screen. And lastly, I'll mention that there will be a chance at the end of today's presentation for an audience Q&A. So if at any point throughout the presentation you have a question for Cody, feel free to type it in the Q&A dialog box. You can also choose to raise your hand and ask your question live. We won't be able to see you, but we will be able to hear you. And please just note that this event is recorded, so if you ask your question live, your voice will be recorded as well. Without further ado, I'll introduce Cody. Cody Tolmie is an interdisciplinary Sq'ewlets artist from their traditional territory of S'ólh Téméxw, who currently lives on the unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. Cody grew up off reserve in Kekinow family housing in Chilliwack, away from his family's reservation of Sq'ewlets. Cody's practice investigates places of historical significance from their perspective and contemporaneous role within Commonwealth history in S'ólh Téméxw in the Fraser Valley. And without further ado, I'll pass it on to Cody to begin.
Great, thank you so much. S'ólh, Cody Tolmie Sq'ewlets, Sq'ewlets. Good day, my name is Cody Tolmie. I come from Sq'ewlets. I'm very honored to be the emerging artist in residence here at Griffin Arts Projects. And without further ado, I'll just jump into our presentation. Second, there's everything in the way. Okay. So I think it's important to just show where Sq'ewlets is specifically. As mentioned in my introductory bio, I didn't grow up on reserve, but I grew up in nearby Tsleil-Waututh at Kekinow family housing. So I show this from our digital Sq'ewlets museum to like kind of formulate where I am from directly. I think that's an important part of my practice, is locating where I'm from, but also acknowledging like somewhat of a distance to my home community. And then this is the greater Alcomalum language family and Salish territory. And then more specifically, this is what it would look like on a map. So just noting all the different bands going up the stall of the Fraser River, and where specifically Sq'ewlets is. So I don't know, I wonder if this is in the way. I don't think I can really talk about my practice without talking about my mentors. And so this is Dion Kazis. He's an Inkakapmuk artist based in Nova Scotia right now. On the left, we see his black work series, which he's developing after researching Salish basketry. So I'm part of this series. This isn't me. I believe this is one of his cousins, but Dion is been a longtime mentor and friend, and has been a major proponent in my, I guess, like academic journey and me as an artist. So, oops. Oh, we'll go next. There we go. And so here is Xwelmewx, Laura Wheelick, a ceramicist based in Chilliwack, another longtime mentor that I'm very fortunate to have in my life. And, you know, these mentorships extend past us as academics and artists and continue into, you know, overall cultural mentorship and I would say, I guess, just like general life. It's a lot to take on a mentee, and I acknowledge that. That's part of why I'm you know, affirming my relationships to them in this this presentation, and just recognizing that yeah, I don't believe my practice just comes from me, and I think it's a big proponent of relationality and in thinking and community relationships. So Tanis Nielsen, one of my painting mentors, although the work that I'll be displaying and talking about is not really within the realm of painting. Very thankful for her mentorship as well, and especially, again, thinking as an artist and how to think about work and how to work, really. So and Sue Donaldson, met during my internship at the BC Arts Council. Very thankful for all of these people. Really, that's why I'm showing them, is just to show thanks publicly and acknowledge them. So, and then Roland Soulier from our Emerging Art residency here at Griffin Arts Projects, where I'm in studio right now. And yeah, super appreciate the time I had with Roland, and pictured is some of the work that she made while she was here. So yeah, big thank you, big quas hi to all these people for helping me understand my practice and kind of like where it does and does not situate itself, and what for the art that I want to make and why I want to make, essentially. So and moving on, so this work is by Tracy Moffat, an Indigenous Australian artist. It's from her Portal series called The Bunker. So this work is work that inspires me, and it is kind of what drives my practice forward, as we'll see shortly. But yeah, there's these different ways of showing, I guess, work in Australia that they're able to navigate this like public privacy, which is something that is really, I think, key to my work, and still show something. So I really appreciate that there's something being presented, but it's difficult to look at, which I think still resonates within my work. And there's a whole series of these that are just amazing. It's photography that's been altered. Oops, I keep turning my volume up and down. And then Bodik's Talquot Head, sorry, from 2016. So this was a work that I don't know if I felt abject in considering what it was doing, but as we'll see, I have like a now a relationship with polyolefin, but something that really like stuck with me and kind of always has. I really love Bodik's series of works, and this work in particular kind of stuck with me. And while I think I'm doing something different with plastics, I think it's an interesting navigation of traditional Indigenous Northwest Coast carving and contemporary material. So my artistic journey kind of begins with, it's not a smooth segue, but it is what it is, with looking at transformer stones in S'ólh Téméxw. So specifically Sq'ewlets, who's pictured here, man turned to stone, and Kekinow, which is located in Camel beside Mission. So this journey started with my research at St. Mary's Residential School, but my fixation came from these ideas of these like static and public knowledge bases within our territorial spaces, which Xwelmewx, Stallo, Sq'ewlets, and related to other areas as well. But looking at these stones as like a kind of fixed maybe epistemology or something that with different degrees of distance that's been made in our family's lives, I guess, like my family specifically, that there's still like some place of learning and understanding our like Xwelmewx story and storytelling narratives. So this is Ts'elxwéyeqw, and this is S'ólh Téméxw, the one I mentioned, featured at Le Camel outside of Mission. And I wanted to jump to this because these transformer stones are moments from transformation, which was during a different time. These beings called the Xwelmewx, I might be butchering that word, but I'm trying my best, traveled from the mouth of the Fraser and then up the river and then to other areas entirely. These stories connect to the interior as well. And throughout this journey, they made different changes to make the world right for the people that would be. So they stopped along these many points, and there's many different transformer stones, and each of them are for a different reason or a different cause or event. In Xwelets's case, it was that Xwelets, the man, was mistreating his partner, and the transformers arrived while that was happening, and they turned him to stone. And Xwelmewx was three chiefs that were tasked with, or three leaders. Chiefs is like a band council thing, but three leaders that were tasked with teaching Xwelmewx the written language. And upon their return, no one was writing, so they turned them into stone for all to see. So this is kind of like also a way of connecting or reconnecting, but without like burdening any like individual family members or community members, because it is like, you know, all knowledge is in the land in some ways. But you know, Xwelmewx has a information center, which I would recommend going and seeing, especially if you're an ally or, you know, visiting the valley. So these transformer stones are throughout our traditional territory, S'ólh Téméxw, and I felt that they were a way of like understanding some of the past before contact, or in finding those ways of like getting closer to understanding landscape and place and history, kind of unmarred or before it was recontextualized, I guess we could say. And then this is like a 2-point journey. So this photo is taken at St. Mary's, and in 2020, September or October, I decided to also connect with another part of, maybe connect isn't the right word, probably examine or research is a better word, with another part of my family's history, which has to do with St. Mary's Residential School. And so I would visit St. Mary's with the idea of doing some audio recordings, taking photos, trying to understand and investigate the space. A big part of that was taking pictures of the informational plaques that are around the different foundations of the buildings. But there was also this kind of, I suppose we would say othering that was occurring at, in this photo. It might be kind of hard to see, but there are two people casually walking around because it's no longer St. Mary's Residential School, it's Fraser Heritage Park. and just this weird disconnection between my understanding of the intensity of history that had happened to my family members, and then also the leisure at which people were using this space. So I decided to document it and try and kind of understand what this space looked like to myself, without investigating anything with my family. I didn't want this to be anything that they would even have on their radar, while also kind of trying to capture how I felt about it with my photography. So in some ways there's this really weird alienation with these, like, you can see through the fog, kind of these buildings that are present on top of this hill in the background, and this fog that's covering everything. It's kind of like dissolving of memory or diffusion of it, while also having this like new context of history that's actively and permanently within the space. And kind of also, I don't know if it was like an accountability thing, but I know at least for my family, like no one has gone over there and taken any photos of it or spent any time there trying to document it. So yeah, and here we have and I should say St. Mary's is in Mission, so it's near La Camel. But here's an example of the foundations that are still present there. And the plaque that you can kind of see to the right of it. And then near the parking lot, there's a series of plaques that mostly lament St. Mary's being lost as a, how would you say, like a heritage site rather than the events that had occurred there. So I made sure to document those things, and specifically like the graveyard, which was you know, spoke about how First Nations families were also buried in this graveyard. There's no responsibility in the language, of course, and talking about how maybe they were put there. But I think it's important to understand like the narrative that had been coming out after this research and what survivor stories were about regarding this school. So I took photos of and documentation of the plaques while also making work that I felt was reflective of my experience of this space. And so this is where some connection, aside from like the vicinity of like Hatem being nearby, with these stones. So there is a stone present at St. Mary's, and I'm unsure if it's a transformer stone. And I'm not professing that I'm an expert at recognizing these, but I think there's some weird relationship to our Palma Stalo understanding of transformer stones, and then having this big boulder, maybe it's boulder-like material present. It's actually near that hall, just it's up the hill a little bit. St. Mary's kind of goes up a hill continuously. And just looking at this stone and its presence, capturing these benches, to take a nice relaxing sit at residential school grounds, and then the lived space that is occupied above. So I felt like this was a good juxtaposition in my mind. And this leads me to the practice I cultivated during my MFA. So this research I had done prior to it and was looking at kind of a textural embodiment of some of the tension I think I felt, and understanding those kinds of, I guess, like events without revealing them. It's not, I'm not interested or invested in sharing things regarding that, but only in mentioning them in regards to my practice. So this first sculpture is, I think it was 2021, in custody of Cenobites. This kind of figurative, almost monstrous forms. These are made out of polyethylene, which I appreciate because of the visual attention. So that's a big reason why I use this melted plastic. And then the one on the right is I just called number 2 because it was a continuation of this the sculptural narrative. Excuse me, but particularly because of the stretching and the tearing of the plastic on these kind of monstrous bodies, I suppose. And then this comes to maximize, I guess, in our spring show for my MFA cohort, which is consumed but not seen. It was 11 feet tall. This was made with polyolefin, which is kind of remained in my practice for now because I still feel like it's communicating some value to my work. And it was to be large and imposing and scary. I'm not trying to make things that are easy to look at. I don't know if I'm necessarily invested in the beauty of aesthetic, but this was something that I felt kind of collided the two areas of research that I was doing while also expressing my relationship to it. Then here's a photo series from St. Mary's, which I did in beginning to understand my thesis work was the potential of an Indigenous Gothic. So these othering feelings and these works which were in our thesis show, and I think hints of what I feel these photos encapsulated were in the previous photos, but they're specifically to kind of show a feeling, understanding, or an initial step of an Indigenous Gothic. I don't think it's been wholly made, or if I've even defined it myself, but it is a navigation and an understanding which I'm invested in and will continue to pursue. I don't think it's something that you just do one time and it works. But so these photo series were accompanied by my larger sculptures, which is, I'll just make sure that we're not in the way. From stone, which is this larger one on the left, and soft monolith, which is the smaller one on the right, which is made out of the components of what I've carved out from the one on the left. And then this is polystyrene and paint and plaster. And thinking about, I suppose, the stone that's at Fraser Heritage Park and maybe its own witnessing and what it had seen and what it how it might feel or what might come out of it from being subjected to that space, while also continuing this kind of figurative work that tries to maintain a presence of self while also being a piece of artwork to look at. And yeah, these were shown with the photos I showed previously as part of Xwelmewx Gothic, which was the initial early steps in understanding this in my work. And this continues. Like I still feel like I'm making with kind of the theoretical process of these in mind. So then this is a recent rework of a work that I had shown at Emily Carr recently and Freiburg as Falk. I continued working on it after. I felt like it needed I think you can almost see it in the background, actually. I felt like it needed more. It didn't feel done. I understand that we as artists have to decide when something's finished and it's up to us. So I feel like it is now, but a kind of understanding of privacy and deciding what to and to not show. So thank you so much. Was hi. Sorry if I rushed through that or if I took too long, but thank you.
Thank you, Cody. That was a really enlightening depth and background into your work, and I'm glad I'm grateful that you shared that with us. I now invite the audience to ask any questions. You can raise your hand and ask the question out loud or type it in the chat. We actually do have a question pending in the Q&A, but I thought I'd start us off with the first question while the audience has a chance to type theirs in. So Cody, my question for you is, in what way do you see the perspective of your artistic practice? I mean, you said you're anti-aesthetic, which is quite controversial, but it's
Yeah.
your right as an artist to define yourself in that way. But I'm just wondering how you see that fitting into the sort of broader landscape of Salish artworks, but then in a way where you're not necessarily seen as a singular figure, because you're also a contemporary artist, you are an emerging artist, you're a recent MFA graduate, and I know that these graduate programs have very distinct practices and very distinct methodologies, and grad school and these academic institutions try to bring you up in one way. So I'm just wondering how you're trying to juggle all of this and all of these hats and all of these identities.
Yeah, I think, well, I don't know. I don't know if I'm fully anti-aesthetic. It's something I'm thinking about though. And that the meaning for making an object is, to me, sometimes supersedes its beauty or reason for looking at it. So, and I think that's something that's present in quite a bit of my work. But I think my relationship to being a co-Salish artist, I think during my MFA actually, and some of the work that we had shown, there was a lot of tension between, especially because I'm using plastics, and I like plastics materially because they're beautiful, they're shiny, they stretch, like their physical properties, but also understanding kind of like, I guess we would say more traditionalist understandings of indigenous materiality. So just because I'm working in plastics doesn't mean that I'm not also learning how to harvest cedar or cedar weave. It's just not something that I'm talking about right now. Doesn't mean I won't later. But in also understanding my work and kind of like the importance I find with the texture of the material that I'm using, I kind of thought about how Aaron Nelson Moody talks about the narrative structure of Salish design and how we'll see different elements in contemporary Salish design forms. So like a thunderbird with an orca whale in its claws or something like this, and how those elements are referring to narrative structure. So I thought about how my work, the components of what make my work also refer to a sense of narrative, and that's present within my sculptural process and my other works. So there's this kind of like, and I'm learning, right? I'm not professing to be an expert at any of these things. It's just my subjective experience and understanding of my work. But thinking about the presence of narrative within my work that is similar to these formalized Salish design structures, I guess we'd say. So does that make sense? I'm sorry.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you for that answer.
Mhm.
We have an audience question from Anthony, and Anthony's asking, could you discuss your experience after completing your MFA, including how you got to this residency and your artistic aspirations moving forward?
Yeah. So after completing my MFA, I immediately jumped into teaching at Kwantlen Polytechnic University as a sessional, which has been a really amazing experience. And then got this residency. So it's continued. It's been a really exciting experience to have like a studio practice with SFU, which super appreciate having a studio space at 611. And then jumping into a space here at Griffin Art Projects. So that's been like really fortunate and amazing, and kind of feels like it's all happening in a way. But I think it's a continuation of practice. So I think it's good to be like continuously making if you can, and deriving from your process in that way. But I got to this residency because it was suggested to me by who was it? Oh, Lauren Crazy Bull sent this to me and was like, "Oh, like you'd be a good fit for this." So I applied, and the team at Griffin Art has been like amazing and super helpful and supportive, and it's been a really like amazing experience, and I'm super thankful and honored to be here. And then my artistic aspirations moving forward. Well, I want to continue investigating this idea of like a Xwelmewx Gothic. I really want to continue with my sculptural processes and just kind of like pushing that as far as I can until I feel like I'm done with it. I think at this point, I'm not really interested in carving in any polystyrene because it's an intensive process. But yeah, I want to keep making and investigating, I suppose. So thank you for your question.
Great, thank you. We have a question from Lisa. Lisa says, Cody, thank you for this thoughtful talk and providing the context for your work and research. I wondered how you see the Indigenous Gothic emerging in the sculptural series as well as the photography.
Yeah, that's a great question because I feel like it's something that I'm still learning about. There's such an extensive understanding of like what Gothics are and how many types of Gothics there are. So I think I felt as though it emerged a bit easier within my photography because of like this framing of a landscape in which there is like, ruins are a classic trope in the Gothic. So you have these ruins of a residential school, and then in this photo you have the grotto, which is, I didn't really speak to or show any pictures of, but you may have been seen in one of the photos on the wall. But at the top of this hill, there's a grotto, and then you have these buildings of like new development in this space. And then on the right, you have a forest that has like this fog moving through. So I felt like that was the best embodiment. I wondered about, especially those sculptures that I made for my thesis series from stone. I wondered about if those had created some sense of abject in the viewer, because there was a couple of times during our opening where people like walked in and were like, ah! And so I don't think they were expecting something that large, or, it kind of contains the space that it's in. But as far as emergence, I feel like, yeah, it needs to be a continued investigation, because part of my thesis work was non-Indigenous people theorizing about an Indigenous Gothic. And like, for example, Misha Kafka's paper about the impossibility of a Maori Gothic based on Maori understanding of the world, like Maori cultural understanding of spirituality. But it's like, this is a great theorization, and that's like super interesting, but this isn't coming from a Maori person. So how do we know if there is or isn't? It's like, it's a great, mental exercise, but I think part of my thesis was saying that if there is an Indigenous Gothic, it needs to be formulated by the experience and understanding of Indigenous people. It's not a continuation of settler Gothics, I suppose. So I hope that answers your question.
Yes, that's a wonderful and thoughtful response. And yes, this is amazing. Thank you. We have another question from Homa Khosravi, and she's wondering what the highlights were from this residency and the mentorship.
Yeah, I think definitely like super thankful to be included in the show with Roland at Emily Carr. That was separate from this residency, but occurred during the mentorship. So I'm really thankful for that. To be shown with so many other amazing Indigenous artists was a big deal, and it was very exciting. And the time that Roland and I spent in studio here discussing practice. So that was a big one. And then I think just like for me, it's kind of getting into that flow state of understanding, or not understanding, the flow state specifically of just making and working. So that's like, I always cherish that moment whenever I can get it. And I really appreciate the time just being here and working and and process, and like, I guess not being worried about what it will look like or audience reaction, but just concerned with the making of the object itself. So that's been an ongoing highlight for my work. I don't know if there's like a significant day, but yeah, it's been really wonderful.
Great. Thanks, Cody. I'll ask the next question, and audience, feel free to type in the chat. I was wondering about the materiality in your work and how that comes to be. I was up there and I saw some barbed wire and some really interesting materials that I wouldn't necessarily traditionally associate with sculpture, like sculpture with a capital S. So I'm seeing these really massive concrete works that you have, and they're really viscous and visceral. So I'm just sort of wondering how you make the decision to choose these kinds of materials.
Yeah, I think initially, especially with my MFA and my undergrad, because I've been making art that will never be shown for many years on purpose, but like these works, I remember moments in my undergrad, I guess specifically, where I was told that I could or could not use a certain material because that wasn't traditional, which I think is a common experience for Indigenous undergraduates and artists that go through the academic system. So my MFA, the priorities of research that I had during my MFA were to like investigate materials that I enjoyed using for one reason or another, but also like enjoyed like making with, like, it sounds like such a simple response, but like the figurative work that I'm making, I enjoy, and like I think it's also important for me to have like human touch on it or something. Like it's been modified for me. I'm not trying to hide or resolve any moments that I've had with my work. I think with these, yeah, you're saying like cement pieces, it's quite a bit more prevalent, and I think that's because now my practice is starting to understand a narrative structure within its creation. So these materials, like, the plaster and bandages and whatever else and paint, I think that like that you can see that it's been affected or made is an important part of it. For myself, I'm not trying to hide that it's material. Like with those, again, my thesis works, I wanted it to be seen as like, yeah, like I used the chainsaw to make that. Like I'm not pretending it's not styrofoam. And the way that I painted it was to ensure that it would be seen as plastic. I'm not pretending it's anything other than that. So I like these materials in which you see the presence of the process in them, I guess.
Yes, all unveiled.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much, Cody, for
Thank you.
sharing your work with us. And it's been a pleasure to have you in residence for the past 2 months. And I invite you all, the audience, to join us tomorrow from 12 noon to 5 p.m. and see Cody's work in person and have a chat, some coffee, tea, maybe wine, we'll see. Yeah, it'll be a lovely Sunday afternoon. And thanks again, Cody.
Thank you so
we'll hope
much.
to see you all tomorrow.
Bye. Thank you,
Thanks,
everyone.
everyone.